All right, hello everybody. I want to do a review of one of the DBQs that has been posted by the College Board. And I posted this with the last video I put up. So I want to go through this with you guys. I've had some questions on this. It's kind of a tricky DBQ. So I want to walk through this one with you. And, if you want to give the DBQ a chance before you watch this, so you can see how you do on it individually, and you can come back and kind of compare that to what I've done here. And what I'll do is I just want to kind of walk through it and show you my thought process as I read through it and think about how you can translate that into, context, thesis, evidence, etc. And at the end, I can put up a context statement, a thesis statement, and kind of show you how to place those together. Okay. So what I've done is I've taken screenshots of each of the documents, and we can just kind of walk through those. And like I said, I will kind of think out loud as we're going through it. And you can pause it at each document, read it yourself, and then kind of listen to my analysis of it. Okay. All right, so let's look at the prompt itself and the rubric, so we can just remember what we need to do here. Okay. First off, let's just remember what the requirements are, right? We need a thesis or a claim. Okay. This is establishing our line of reasoning. It's our argument, right, that we're going to prove, okay? We need some context for this, right? 2-3 sentences at the most. Don't get deep into this. You don't have time for that, okay? That's not what they're looking for, okay? And then to support our argument, our thesis, we need to use the documents, right? And we need to use at least 4 of them to get all of your points, okay? And then beyond that, they're looking for 2 additional pieces of evidence that supports our thesis too. And I'll show you how to use those as well. And also for 2 of the documents, they want us to look at the source itself, right? So you could look at the author's point of view. You could look at the purpose of the document, right? Why was it written? What is the document itself? The audience, etc. Okay, and how that's useful to the argument as well. Okay. All right, so our prompt, evaluate the extent to which Christianity changed societies in Latin America in the period 1500 to 1800, right? So if we situate this in time, we're looking at 1500 to 1800. And hopefully when you're thinking of that in world history, you're thinking about this as this period of European expansion, right? This is them venturing out with mercantilism and capitalism and colonialism. In the Americas, in Africa, and in Asia, right? However, they've narrowed down our geographic range simply to Latin America. So we're looking at Latin America in this period. That should make you think of the Spanish and the Portuguese, right? And then the kind of historical topic we're looking at is Christianity, right? And what kind of changes is this bringing to Latin America during this period? Okay? So evaluate the extent to which all they're really asking us is, how does Christianity change societies in Latin America, right? So how much changes are they going to bring, right? Are there going to be continuities, things that stay the same? And are there going to be things that change because of the arrival of Christianity, right? So to contextualize this, and I'll come back to this at the end, and I'll put up a couple of sentences of context as an example, but, let's think about this, right? If we want to think about this in a broad historical context, again, you're thinking about European expansion during this period, right? And as they expand, Christianity comes with them, right? So you could mention the expansion into Africa, into Asia, into the Americas, and how Christianity follows that expansion. And then narrow in a little bit, right? Narrow in on the Spanish coming to the Americas and the missionaries that come with them. Okay? But like I said, we'll come back to that. All right, so let's get into the documents. And remember, what we're looking for are continuities, things that stay the same, and things that change with the arrival of Christianity. So document 1. Here we've got a Catholic priest who has written a manuscript, a book, to aid other priests who are working with the native population of Mexico. Okay? So presume this guy has experience, and he's trying to teach these new priests how to better do their job of converting people, right? So after reading the first paragraph, hopefully what you see is that even though these priests are here doing this missionary activity, once you get outside of the metropolis, these urban areas where these missions are, rural areas in particular, the teachings aren't taking hold, right? You see them still practicing what he calls idolatry, right? He says they're spilling their venom, right? Persuading people not to forget the ways of their ancestors, right? But he does say they have to do this with stealth and they have to be hidden to avoid discovery, right? And that's interesting. So keep that in the back of your head too, because that's something that's going to come up again. So first thing we see is a continuity, right? The fact that, Christianity has arrived, but it's not completely taken hold. You still have these old ways being practiced by the indigenous people, right? They have not abandoned them, right? And then you get into paragraph 2, and we see something interesting happening here, right? We see syncretism, right? We do see the old ways being practiced, but they're being practiced alongside this new belief system that's come in, Christianity, right? So he says they're venerating Christ our Lord, the saints, they're performing the holy sacraments, but at the same time, they're making sacrifices to fire, right? They're sacrificing hens and animals, etc. So we see syncretism here. That's what the description is, right? So far with this one document, we can make two arguments here. One, yes, Christianity has arrived. However, indigenous people have not abandoned their traditional belief systems, right? They're still practicing these things, albeit in secret, right? Argument 2 would be that they've also picked up on some of these Christian belief systems too, right? So they're still practicing indigenous ways. However, on top of that, we have the addition of these Christian practices as well, right? Which we would call syncretism, right? So far, we can make two arguments: the continuity of belief systems, right, from pre-Spanish times, and then the syncretism that's occurring with the arrival of Christianity. So as we go through, let's see if we can build off of these two arguments, if we can add documents that will help us make those two arguments. All right, document 2. We have a Native American from a town in Oaxaca, Mexico, and he's a witness in a court case involving religious ceremonies. So interesting document, right? Where we have Spanish authorities, looks like they're prosecuting people for practicing non-Catholic beliefs, right? They're putting them on trial here, right? And after reading the first paragraph, again, very similar. We see these native practices continuing, right? And we're in 1703 here. We're a couple of hundred years into colonization at this point. Yet it's not gone, right? They haven't abandoned these traditional belief systems. The missionaries have not been completely successful in their conversion strategies, right? We see it here. And, they say they still have heathen priests, right? So we still have a priesthood based out of these Native American religions too, right? However, now we know why. I'm going to go back. He says that they had to be stealthy and hide this stuff, right? Because when you do this, what happens, right? You get put on trial. That's what we see with the sourcing of this document, right? So this is an important source because it shows us that they are prosecuting people, right? It helps us make this argument about secrecy, right? And why they're having to do this in secret to continue their belief system, okay? So this is a good place to use this source to discuss the continuities in belief systems and why they're doing it in hiding, right? And when you read the second paragraph, again, very similar to that first document, right? You've got the description of syncretism happening, right? So they're saying they do all this stuff, right? They make these sacrifices, they continue these traditional systems, but, they place these things on the altars of churches, they sing Christian devotional songs, all while, wearing traditional clothing, right? Feathers, etc. So very similar document. So again, same two arguments, right? The continuity in traditional belief systems that's continuing, they haven't stopped. And then the syncretism of Christianity with some of these traditional belief systems. Right? And again, use that source here, right? You can mention that the source is evidence for why they're doing this in secret, right? The purpose of this witness was to prosecute this person. Okay? Document 3, again, we have the testimony at a trial, right, for this individual who seems to be a shaman or a healer of some sort who the population is coming to, and you can assume they're coming to her instead of the Catholic priests, right? So again, very, very similar document, right? We have evidence that traditional belief systems are continuing, that you have shamans or healers who are in demand, right? But again, use your source analysis, right? This shows you the danger in doing this, right? The purpose of this, again, it's testimony, right? To convict this person at an Inquisition trial. So I would use both of those as sources, as source evidence. They're very similar, and they both kind of back up this argument that you made earlier that you have to do this kind of stuff in hiding to continue it, right? And it's dangerous, right? You can be put on trial, you can be prosecuted, thrown in jail, executed sometimes, right? It's dangerous. Okay. All right, document 4. I found this to be an odd document. Very interesting. It's something we did talk about in class, these diffusion of African belief systems coming with the transatlantic slave trade and the diaspora from Western Africa, right? And that's what we're getting into here. You've got enslaved and free African Brazilians establishing a church in Brazil, a Catholic church, which interesting development, right? Very interesting. However, when I look at these 5 documents, this one kind of stands out as something that doesn't exactly fit into the argument we've been making, which has tended to focus on the relationship between Spanish, or maybe we should say European Christianity, and indigenous peoples in the Americas, right? More Native Americans. So when I look at 5, and I see that that's a similar document to 1, 2, and 3, I decide not to use this, right? It's interesting in itself, but we didn't add any context for this, which you would have to put in there. That's just going to add more work for you. So I would honestly skip that one and move to 5, because this, as you'll see, this fits in really, really well. Okay. So here we've got an emissary from the King of Spain. And he's basically telling the king what's going on with these missionaries in Paraguay, right? And how well this conversion process is going. And after you read it, you'll see some very similar things that have been happening in these earlier documents too, that work really, really well with our argument, right? Especially the argument of syncretism, right? So I would use this in my second paragraph, body paragraph on syncretism, right? Because he says they're baptized, right? They know how to say their prayers. They know how to recite the chorus. So they're doing these things outwardly that would appear to make them Christian. Yet this guy acknowledges, right? He says that people who are around here say that the true religion, which what he means by that is Christianity, is not really taking hold, right? Outwardly, sure, it appears that way. They're performing the rituals, they're doing those things, but when they go home, what are they actually doing? Right? They're probably practicing their traditional belief systems, right? So in the process of doing this, you're creating something new, right? These Catholic rituals are being performed, baptism, Catholic mass, the songs, etc. But when you go home in your private spaces, you're probably doing other things. So you're creating this new system, right? And you keep doing this over tens, hundreds of years, what are you going to end up with, right? It's something that's different than Christianity, and it's also something that's different than these original indigenous belief systems, right? So again, this is a good example for syncretism, okay? So let me go through context, thesis, and how to back up your argument, so you can kind of lay that out for you, okay? So here's what I said for context in the beginning, right? And I've got two things. The big picture, right? The expansion of Spanish and Portuguese empires resulted in the diffusion of Catholic Christianity to the Americas, to Africa, to Asia. You know, we looked at all of that in class, right? This one deals specifically with the Americas. We're seeing that. We saw Christianity arriving in West Africa and the Congo, right? We saw Christianity rising in Asia. We looked at Japan specifically, and we saw how that didn't go very well for the Christians in Japan, right? There was a lot of persecution there. So this is kind of the global view, and then we kind of zone in on the Americas itself, right? Spanish colonization of the Americas was supported by the missionary work of the Catholic Church, right? And what did they do? Well, they attempted to impose these European beliefs and practices on the native populations, which is very helpful for colonizers, right? You have an ally in the Catholic Church, which tries to bring European culture in and transform the way these people live, right? So colonization kind of works hand in hand with the Catholic Church in Spanish America here, right? So again, don't spend a lot of time on your context. 2-3 sentences that kind of lay out the bigger picture that this is happening within, okay? Now, for your thesis, remember, we're making two arguments, right? One is that there was a maintenance of indigenous beliefs, and then two, that there was a syncretism of indigenous and Christian beliefs. So here's my first argument. Although Spanish colonization forced many changes in indigenous societies in the Americas, native peoples were able to maintain many of their traditions and beliefs, right? That maintenance. Second argument. The practicing of two belief systems resulted in syncretic changes in native societies in the Americas, right? So we got to prove both of these. This maintenance of belief systems and this syncretic change that's coming to these societies, okay? Now here's what I'm going to do for making this argument in my body paragraph, right? I'm going to lift this first sentence. I'm going to use it as a topic sentence in body 1. Because why not, right? It works, okay? And then we can just prove it, okay? So let's prove it. Native peoples were able to maintain many of their traditions and beliefs. And as we went through it, we saw that happening, right? So we'll use document 1, document 2, and document 3. Paragraph 1 in document 1, that's where we saw this manual, which described these rural areas still practicing their native beliefs, right? Doing it in secret, okay? So there's evidence that there's maintenance of these belief systems right there, right? They describe it in this document. Document 2, we have more evidence, right? This time it's coming from court testimony in a religious trial where we have a description of native practices happening, right? So again, another piece of evidence that there is maintenance of these traditions and beliefs. And this is where you get into your source analysis, right? This is where you can come back to, well, why are they doing this in secret? Now we know, right? This source itself tells us that if you don't do this in secret, you might get caught, right? And if you get caught, you're going to be prosecuted because this document is literally from a trial, right? It's witness testimony, okay? So you can use that to strengthen this argument that, yes, they're continuing these native beliefs, but they're having to do it in secret. And then 3 is very, very similar, right? This is also testimony from a trial. This is the one where we were describing this native shaman, this healer, right? Where she's continuing to practice these native beliefs. But, you know, you can get in trouble, right? Because again, this is also testimony from a court trial, right? So we've done both of our source analysis here, talking about this witness testimony, which shows us that, you know, there's a reason that they do these things in secret, right? So, you know, we proved it, right? There were maintenance of these traditions and practices. We saw it in 3 separate documents, right? Now, notice I didn't bring in any outside evidence here because I'm going to do that in the second argument, my second paragraph, okay? All right, so our argument 2, which would be our second paragraph, okay? Again, I just lifted my thesis, the second part of my thesis. Exact same, I didn't change anything. Practicing of 2 belief systems resulted in syncretic changes in native societies in the Americas. All right, let's prove it with some of these documents, okay? Document 1, this is where you get into paragraph 2 there, and we see the syncretism, right? They're talking about it in this manual, right? Talking about practicing Catholic ceremonies to conceal what they're doing from the missionaries. Again, that idea of secrecy can result in syncretism, right? As I mentioned, you're replacing perhaps a indigenous god or saint with a Christian saint, right? And then over time, what does that mean to both of these belief systems as you're doing this, right? You're changing it, right? You're blending them. You're syncretizing them, okay? Document 5, very, very similar, okay? Shows the syncretism again. They're performing these Catholic rituals in public, right? They're getting baptized, they're singing the songs, etc. But in the document, they acknowledge, right? Not much is happening beyond that. They don't think that when they go home that they're Christians, right? They think that when they go home, they're still practicing their native beliefs in private, right? Notice I didn't do any source analysis there because we already did 2. But this is where I can bring in this outside info on syncretism. Okay, and maybe this could be a good conclusion, just kind of a final paragraph to wrap everything up and tie it across time periods to make it a little more complex argument, right? And what I said is syncretic belief systems are still influential on societies in the Americas today, right? If you remember in class, we looked at a couple of examples of this. In Mexico, we looked at the Day of the Dead as being a syncretic belief system that's still ongoing. Right, and even in the U.S. too. In Brazil, we looked at candomblé, right, which is still practiced by millions of people. That syncretic African indigenous Catholic belief system. Okay, still ongoing today. So we've taken this from 1500 to 1800 and pulled it across history to these things that have still continued to this day. And then we can end it with a sentence that kind of shows the complexity of this, though, right? While Christianity is the dominant religion in the Americas today, native beliefs transformed its practices in many regions. Okay? So I think that would work as a pretty good conclusion that would include your 2 outside pieces of evidence and kind of make this a little more complex where you're looking across time periods, right, at continuities and changes that are still here after that end date of 1800. Okay? Now, a couple more things. As far as the grading of this goes, there's 10 points available. Hopefully you've looked at the actual rubric that they put out and looked at the very first video I put out where I went through it. Now, they haven't told us how the grading is going to work. I'm hoping it works like this. Now, I don't know. This is my assumption that if you convert this 10 points to a 5-point scale, it should work out something like this, right? If you just do the basic math on it. But I don't know. So don't bank on that, but that's my assumption. That's how it should work. But I don't know with the College Board. So, and then the last thing, just from grading and scoring essays and giving feedback and talking with students through email and other means, what I'm seeing, again, is the same problems we had in class when we were working on this, issues with context, issues with looking at the source analysis itself, like point of view, purpose, etc., and then that outside evidence. So hopefully this helps you with that. But if you still have questions on these 3 things, please email me and ask me, especially if you have something specific that you need to understand. Get in touch with me and I will email you back, okay? And I'll be as specific as I possibly can to help you with this. All right, and I will get another video on the next final time period out to you guys too. Remember the test is next Thursday. So if you have questions, concerns, please email me over the next couple of days and I will do the best I can to help you with that. Also, make sure you guys are looking at your correspondence with the College Board. They've had a lot of problems with the testing. So there's a lot of stuff you guys have to have in line on your end so we can make sure the stuff goes through. And I'll put together a document on that as well that kind of combines all these problems they've had so we can see how we can hopefully do this right. All right, guys, I miss you and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.